Good afternoon. I do not know. He was downstairs. Oh, here he comes. Thank you all for all being here. Today is April the 23rd. This is a committee on Ways and Means, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. And if I can, ask Councilmember Mitchell if he wouldn't mind leading us in the invocation.
Take time to be holy. Speak art with thy God. Abide in him always and feed on his word. Heavenly Father, we come to you once again, asking you to come into our midst and bless everyone who is assembled here today. My colleagues, the mayor, and everyone else who is sitting here in these historical chambers. And let my colleagues know, and all of us, that we are here as a servant, and that's what you have placed us here to be, and not to do anything for personal gain, but to serve your people, which is our brothers and sisters. These blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, sir. First item on the agenda is approval of the April 9th minutes. Is there a motion?
Okay. Thank you.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it. Item 3 is bids and purchases. Is there a motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 4 is approval to submit a 2019 South Carolina DHEC Solid Waste Reduction Grant. Okay. Is there any?
4 and 5. 4 and 5,
Right.
yes.
Did you get who you? I think you picked. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is the Office of Cultural Affairs, and we actually have
Approval.
several on here. Do y'all want to put those together?
All of them.
That's items
6, 7, 8.
let's see, 6 through 11.
Yes.
All right. So we got a motion and a second. Any discussion on items 6 through 11?
All right, who was the second?
All over the place.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 12 is the Fire Department submitting 2019 Homeland Security Grant. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 13 is the Police Department approval to apply application for $23,000 for an advocate resource specialist. Any discussion? Councilman Moody,
Is that coming out of this 2019 budget, or is that
for the match. Ms. Wharton,
20%.
is for the match for that grant, is that going to be general fund? Okay, general fund proceeds
2019?
for 19. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And and that's approved. So item 14 is deferred. Item 15 is a resolution expressing the intent and establish a Morrison Drive redevelopment project
Move for
area.
approval.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Now, ayes have it. Item 16 is
Move
an
for
ordinance to
approval.
amend the Charleston Neck redevelopment project area. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the ayes have it. Item 17 is Committee on Real Estate. Chairman Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several things here. Items A, B, C, D, and E were all approved. F and G were deferred, and the 2 annexations were approved. And let me go right back to the first thing that went on this was that the minutes from the previous meeting were approved with a name adjustment. So I make a motion that we approve those items.
So you're saying A,
A, B, C, D, and E are all approved. F and G was deferred. We didn't take those up. And H, those 2 were approved.
So that's so we got a motion and a second for the report. Okay, I think I saw Councilman Seekings first, then Ms. Jackson.
I just know you all are down there for a good bit of time. I'm just looking at E, which is discussion, is for approval. Was there any action taken as a result of E?
yes, I think that needs to be brought up.
So maybe I can, well, I mean, Mr. Chairman,
Why don't you go ahead,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and make your statement as to what the motion was.
right.
that it was approved.
Okay, so the site in question that was, that this associated with is the contract between the City of Charleston and School of Law that we would allow for the reverter clause. This was done actually almost 2 years ago now. The reverter clause would be removed from this property and be sold, and then we would have a split between ourselves and the Charleston School of Law. And I think you all are probably familiar with that transaction. Effectively, what happens is that this transaction was a 2-year agreement, and we had the opportunity that it would automatically extend for a 3rd year unless either party, ourselves or the School of Law, made the decision and chose not to allow for the contract to extend for the 3rd year. We had to give 60 days notice, and we are within that time frame. And so the whole point of me asking for this to come forward is I think we all recognize the situation at hand with this property being sold for a very substantial amount of money, much more so than this body actually had even contemplated back originally when this reverter was allowed to be removed 2 years ago. But moreover, it's now being sold for a hotel, and the site is certainly, from a civic planning perspective, not the appropriate site for a hotel. It is appropriate site for the School of Law, but they've chosen, at least in the last discussions we've had, to put the School of Law somewhere else. So the motion that I had made was to instruct legal staff to give notice to the School of Law that we would, in fact, not extend the contract. Subsequently to that, it would make that our note would be due, because we did, in fact, lend them the money to buy it from us. Odd as that sounds, that did, in fact, occur. But we did that, and so by allowing for that to happen, our intent and our hope is that it gives us an opportunity to renegotiate this transaction. And I will say, as an aside, as we finished up the real estate committee, there could be an opportunity, if we were to allow for some potential variances on that site, that the School of Law may be able to use that site, which is the first I've heard of that. And quite frankly, as I told Mr. Bell, it would make, I think this body very pleased to have the School of Law go there, because that's what we intended when we did this back in 2005, if I remember. There are a couple things, the reason why I brought this forward, and I thought that was important. Number one is that the deal as it stands, given the circumstances we now know, a sales price at $12.5 million, 75% of that going to the School of Law and 25% to the City of Charleston, is a great deal for the School of Law and is not a great deal for the city and the taxpayers. The other thing that's important to recognize is that this body now has more information than it had before. There are many things that we were not aware of in real estate and then subsequently City Council years ago that, quite frankly, had we had that information, it is very unlikely that we would have actually approved that reverter to be removed 2 years ago. The things that we didn't know that it was going to be marketed specifically for a hotel. We didn't know that the value was as significant as it, in fact, was. It came to light that we didn't know that the mayor's School of Law was a client of his. We didn't know that his son's firm was representing a part of that transaction. These are all things that we would have taken into consideration, and we would have spent some more time and due diligence understanding exactly what this transaction meant for the citizens of Charleston. Now that we have that information, I think we need to take an opportunity and do our best for the citizens of Charleston to take a shot and try to change the trajectory of what happens on that site. That's the reason I brought it forward. Thank you for giving me a moment to speak on that. Further discussion. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Councilor Zing, thank you. Mr. Mayor.
So, Mr. Chairman, so this motion passed by a 3-2 vote at committee, and I think a bit of new information came forward, including a reminder of the incredible public benefit that the School of Law brings to our city, and the original purpose for the sale of the property to them way before I became mayor, almost 10 years ago, that Mayor Riley and the council at that time realized the great institutional and economic benefit of having a graduate program, a law school here in Charleston. So in addition, as I could nowhere near as eloquently as Mr. Bell shared with us, and a few of his students were there today, the thousands of hours that the students give back to our community, the amazing diversity of their student population, higher minority participation in law school than I think almost anywhere in the country. The economic benefit of having a staff of 300 and some odd with the school and the students as well. It's just an amazing benefit to Charleston. And as you noted, Mr. Chairman, at the end of the discussion, there was a willingness for them to discuss other possibilities with the property and with the city. And so I would respectfully ask, and we also learned that the date for the notice being given rather than the end of June is actually the end of July, I think July 20th, that the agreement actually wasn't signed until late July. So we still have at least another month to be able to give them the 60-day notice if that's something that council would like to do. And for the record, I do want to share, as I did in the committee meeting, that when I was elected mayor, that I hung up my real estate license, and since that time have represented no one, including the School of Law, as a real estate client. I've been out of the business. So anyway, I would respectfully ask council to defer this matter until at least our next meeting, so that, Mr. Chairman, you do have an opportunity to sit down and discuss those possibilities with them. I have a motion to defer.
I'll second that motion.
I think Councilman Jackson, then Councilman Griffin.
Wait, I was one of the 2 no votes about this, and I do think in some ways of doing real estate deals, it makes sense. Obviously, we are here serving at the pleasure and the opportunity to take our responsibilities seriously to the taxpayers. I was very impressed with the recount from the president of the law school, and I believe the statistics, and I believe the outcome of the law school's benefit to the community, and something that we could not physically replace, financially replace, in the way that the students that are in law school are able to supplement all of the legal work that is done pro bono for our whole community. The Community Land Trust that I serve on as a volunteer board member has received significant pro bono services from the law school. So I've been an observer of their skill at doing that. One of the convincers for me today was Mr. Bell's clear statement to us that if we decided to remove or give the notice within 60 days to not honor the third-year extension, that they would be able to repay the city the money that's owed. So that really takes away the opportunity to do any sort of creative renegotiation of this contract. And I think that we should, and we really did not know, and I think it would be worthy to find out the background on the conversations that had gone on with the law school and how they might better redevelop their property for their own law school use. So I think we do have a great opportunity to do that, and that's why I would ask that we could defer it for at least another month and then seriously explore the availability of this property to the law school's long-term purpose to stay here. So thank you.
Councilman Griffin, then Councilman Mitchell.
I just want to touch on a couple of things. First off, the fact that the law school gives back to the community, that's nice and all, but that is just a way of trying to just divert the attention away from the real topic here. And that is that when council approved this deal more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago almost, the whole basis of that was that they were going to do everything they could to build a law school on that piece of property. And, just want to say a couple of things about that. You know, the city did something nice, and we're really paying for it. We haven't really gotten anything out of it. Nowhere near what they're going to get out of it. And yes, I do believe that it's great for the law school to have a substantial building long-term. But I've seen that site many times. And I completely agree with you, Councilmember White, that if we could grant them some variances and at least explore that possibility, then we should. And, you know, I'm a little bit taken aback here tonight because, you know, I know that this came up a couple of years ago for this reverter clause. And I wonder, did the mayor express to council his dealings with the law school and how he was a part of this at that time? Did y'all know about that at the time? And so that to me is a red flag. And then the bigger red flag is that, you know, just recently in the last week or two, you know, there's been all this talk of hotel moratoriums and how the city council and the mayor are at odds. But yet the mayor is sitting up here defending the building of a hotel. And that to me is very hypocritical. It doesn't make sense. And we've got to decide what we're doing here. Either we're against hotels or we're not. We're not going to be for a hotel because somebody had a part of it. That's not fair. So, you know, I don't think waiting a month is going to do anything. You know, either we're going to move forward on this project or we're not. But this is not turning out to be a good deal for the city. This is good old boy politics. And we've got to get away from this because, you know, somebody turns out looking like a rose and the other doesn't turn out looking good at all. And it's because we were nice and we tried to invest in something and now we're getting nothing out of it. And our taxpayers are the ones who are suffering. And private people are the one who are benefiting. And that's just not fair.
Councilor Mitchell?
Well, I agree, excuse me, with my colleague Griffin. But I was here when we voted on that and put that reverter clause in there. And that reverter clause was in there to really be something that we can come back and receive if the law school was not going to exist at the time. And we wanted to make sure that we were using taxpayers' money at the time doing this and giving them this school, but if they can't use it, just come back to the city. And then if the city wanted, we could sell it now. They are selling, my dilemma is they want to sell it to make all this money, but then we get the change. I don't understand, that's the problem, I don't understand that piece of it. I think we can sell it and make all that money and put it in affordable housing. And that's what I'm looking at, affordable housing, but if they're gonna sell it and make all this money, then I got a problem with that. I have a big problem with that, Mr. Mayor. I have a big problem with that. When I heard about this, that's my dilemma on that. Because we put the reverter clause in that, during that time in 2005 or whenever it was, to protect us, to protect the city, to protect our taxpayers, because that's taxpayers' money that we are using. We are supposed to be good stewards of taxpayers' money, or taxpayers' dollars. And right now, when I heard they're going to sell it and make all this money, I said, my God, we're not going to get nothing. $2 million, $3 million, and you're going to make $15 million or $12 million or whatever the case may be? That's ludicrous to me. I have a problem with that because this is what it was, and that's why we put the reverter clause in most of the things that we do, that if it's failed to exist or they can't do it anymore, it reverts back to the city, then we can do something with it. And that's my problem with it, because it seems to be giving away too much on this. And that's it, wherever my colleagues decide they want to do. But that's my dilemma on that, and I have mixed emotion on it right now.
Councilmember Shade,
Thank you,
Councilmember
Chairman.
Gregory.
I have a question for our legal department. Okay, Susan. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I want some clarification. So the initial contract that was signed between the city and the School of Law, did it have a contingency clause restricting the use of the building or restricting what they could do with the building, the property?
Well, the original agreement, which was entered into in 2005 and then has been modified and extended, did have the reverter clause in it. and the reverter clause says that the property is to be used for construction.
Susan, stand a little closer to the microphone,
sorry.
please. Thank you.
Reverter clause is to be used for construction, and I don't have the exact language in front of me, but I can get it, but related to law school operations. And so just to fast forward, for everybody's recollection, back in 2017, City Council approved basically an arrangement where the Charleston School of Law was given the ability to sell the property. And at that point in time, we said if it's sold or when it's sold, the city's note would be repaid, which was $865,000, and any accrued interest that was not paid, and a value was put on the reverter of $1 million. And so at that point in time, again, 2017, it was understood or believed that the Charleston School of Law would stay on the peninsula, but that its current location was not suitable for the law school. And so this agreement gave them the authority to go ahead and to try to sell the property to stay on the peninsula, to develop a law school at a more suitable place. And at the time that they would sell the property, the city would get paid back the note, any accrued interest that was not paid, and the $1 million to remove the reverter. It has a term in it that says the agreement expires in 2 years, which would be July 20th of this year. There's got to be a 60-day advance notice if we're going to terminate, but the agreement could be extended for 1 more year. And there's a term that says if the property is not sold at the time of the expiration of the agreement, either now or a year from now, the Charleston School of Law still has the right to sell the property. And then at that point in time, we would receive 25% of the net proceeds from the sale, and then minus the note and accrued interest if that had been already paid.
And what I'm trying to get clarification on, which was a motion that was before the Real Estate Committee, was that to direct legal staff to provide 60 days notice. Exactly what is that notice going to do?
The notice will terminate the agreement, and under the terms of the 2017 agreement, we are entitled to have the Charleston School of Law pay back the note, which is $865,000, and any interest that's due, which Amy told me is about $34,000, is that right? $34,000. So we would get $865,000 and $34,600 back at the time of termination. However, the Charleston School of Law still has the authority to move forward with selling the property, and at the time of the sale, we would get proceeds, 25% of, I'm going to call it the net proceeds, but it's the 25% of the proceeds, but you take off the top real estate commission, deed stamps, something else.
So this I want to make sure I'm clear on this particular part of it. If we execute this notice, the 60-day notice, we're terminating our agreement essentially, but the School of Law still has title to the property. They still have the ability to sell the property at whatever price they come up with. We get our negotiated cut out of that, what we had already discussed. But this does not stop the sale of the property, and does not, and so whoever buys it has to go through the regular zoning requirements and other requirements to build what they want to build on there. So we're not, I just want to make sure we're clear on this. We're not stopping the sale of the property with this motion, are we? That's why that's my question.
No.
We have to recognize the contract that exists.
Right.
We have to recognize the contract exists, and so and that's sort of my question in general, Mr. Chairman. By approving this motion, what have we accomplished?
So maybe I can answer
We're
that.
accelerating the receipt of the money.
So let me answer that. So the School of Law come June, when it terminates at July
20th.
They will pay us our note. Our note immediately becomes due. They've got to write us a check for $865,000 plus accrued interest. If they're available to do that and they can write that check to us, fantastic. If they can't, or they choose to negotiate the terms in which that loan is repaid and extend the terms, then we will certainly engage with them in a discussion with that. But if they choose option B, which quite frankly is the better option, then we will proceed with that negotiation, and with the expectation we'll end up with a better split for the citizens of Charleston and giving us purview over who they sell it to for the future purpose on that site. Now, the other alternative is a notes due, and we can foreclose. I don't suggest that that's the right thing to do, but that's certainly within our right as a mortgagee on that, with that loan, that loan.
And while I still have the floor, I just want to make sure that I'm just following all of this, and that we all understand this. So we give them the notice, and they exercise option A, they can proceed and do what they want with the property. We get our money, they can sell it, and then whoever buys that property has to go through the normal routine of developing. If they come back and say we want to enter into further discussions, that's exactly what we're doing. We're entering into discussions of how to handle this now extended or extinguished extension. So we still have it, they still have title to the property. And if we engage in foreclosure proceedings, that takes that's not a quick resolution of this property.
And recognize that's not the interest. I just point that out, that is an option.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, but I just want to make sure that as we're stepping through this process, that we all understand what we're exercising or not exercising. If the intent here is that we want the law school to remain on the peninsula, and we're encouraging them to stay on the peninsula and develop this land that the city owns, and to keep the law school here, I'm just not sure that this motion on the floor is the right mechanism for doing that. I agree with everybody that we need to encourage them and do what we need to do to keep them on the peninsula. There's a lot of benefit for them staying on the peninsula, and I want to make sure that whatever we're doing with this process satisfies that goal and that intent. I'm just afraid with this motion as it stands right now that we may be doing the exact opposite of that. And I haven't talked to Mr. Bell about it. I haven't talked to any developers about this. I'm familiar with the law school. As president of the County Bar Association, I had extensive dealings with the law school. I know the merits and what they do here and the students they produce. I'm just wondering maybe the pause button may be the proper thing to do on this thing to make sure that our intent and what we want to do is fully carried out. And I'm just afraid that what we may be doing is the exact opposite in what we're trying to accomplish.
So I'm calling Councilman Gregory, but let me, if I could, just respond that to 1 second, just for clarification to make sure. When we walked in that door to Real Estate Committee this evening, the expectation was that site would be sold to a hotel, and it would be a hotel, which none of us believe is the right thing to do. We walked out with my motion, and we've now gotten to the point where we're getting ready to engage in discussion where possibly the School of Law may be on that site, which is exactly what we wanted from the get-go. So to say that the motion that's on the floor is not going to have the effect that we want, I can tell you it's already starting to have the effect, and by pressing forward tonight, it's going to ensure that it goes to completion, and we'll do our best to make our best effort to try the trajectory. Councilman Gregory, then I'll come back to you, Councilman
Mr.
Jackson.
Chairman, thank you for bringing this to our attention, number one. But as public servants, we must disclose or accuse ourselves from voting or participating in anything that might appear as though there's self-interest involved. I've learned as a public servant that the test is not whether or not you are involved or whether or not you're doing it. It's whether or not there's the appearance of. There's an appearance test here. And I do think as public servants, we need to make sure that we disclose or accuse ourselves from any transaction brought before this body where we or our family may have interest. And I just wanted that for the record. Thank you.
Councilman Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman White. I think I am going to be repeating myself, but I do think that Councilmember Shade has put his finger on the crux of what our vote would do. And in all due respect, yes, you brought us this idea of potentially having the law school consider 3 options if we chose to not honor the third-year extension. But really, Mr. Bell made it clear to us at the committee meeting level that the law school is prepared to be able to pay off the debt. So that really takes away any hope of negotiating that you brought forward to the real estate committee. And I think that Mr. Bell was the one who actually said, you know, a couple of years ago, if we'd had the opportunity to think more strategically about how to redevelop our property and use it for the law school, because we would be able to have some sort of change in the zoning or the constraints on parking and height or anything else that the law school knows they're going to need as they grow their mission to be a more fully orbed master's granting law school, as their intention is. So this really is, you know, it's an evolving thing, and I cannot believe that if we don't extend, that if we would keep the extension in place, that we wouldn't get to that level of very deliberative opportunity for how to help the law school stay there. So I don't think voting on this motion really has any value in helping that conversation go forward. So I do want to vote to defer. Thank you.
Councilman Waring?
I think Councilman Seekins had his hand up.
Okay, Councilman Seekins?
Mr. Dean, I just got a couple procedural questions, actually. The way this came to our agenda, it was for discussion. Do we have any notice issues with this, if we're directing staff to enter into contractual discussions and all that?
I don't think so.
So they can do it? Okay.
I'm no lawyer, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express.
Gotcha. Good job.
Councilman Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I told President Bell, I just happened to be chairman of the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce when the law school was looking at coming to Charleston. And they bought the building from the chamber, or entity, I should say, bought a building from the chamber where the law school got the initial startup. And the chamber sold that building for less because it preferred the economic impact of a law school going there. There was the gentleman that bought, or the entity that bought Old Edwards 5 and Dime had the higher contract on the chamber, and we took less dollars, 6 figures less, to enable the law school to get going there. So as far as the impact of the law school and what they do and what they continue to do, and hopefully what they will do, I support. And I think we all support that. But our meeting down there was very revealing. When we deliberated in 17, at that time, I did not know that the law school was a former client of the mayor. He did not disclose that in our deliberations. Had I known that, I would not have voted to remove the reverter clause. I read that in the newspaper after we voted on it. After we voted on it as members of the real estate committee, as well as city council. When we deliberated again to remove the reverter clause, we did not know that the price was $12 million. There was no MAI appraisal brought forth to us. The mayor knew information, more information than we had. And the transparency on that reeks. So to say that you gave up your real estate license, it is important to know that that's a former client of yours before you ask us to vote. So yeah, as a council person that represents 11,000 people, you feel blindsided by that. You feel like you want to have the right information, pro and con, before you cast a vote. It's just a prudent thing to do. Mr. Bell, to his credit, after the vote said, and I'm telling you, he's an honorable man. He said, if we could get 2 more floors, we can stay right at the site. He said, but the city told us we couldn't do that. So I posed the question to you, Mr. Mayor, who in the city conveyed to the law school that they could not expand 2 floors for the law school to be placed on that site? I'm asking a question. So President Bell is, he's not correct in saying what he said. Did anybody in the city, we have our planners here, did anybody in the city, legal, planning, mayor, any executive staff, convey to the law school or its representatives that getting 2 additional floors for the law school to remain at that site would not be approved by the city?
I am not aware of any conversations that's been had with them. I have had no discussion with Mr. Bell or any of his associates about the height on that site or construction on that site, to my knowledge. So I don't think my staff have talked to them.
Well, Mr. Bell seems to be a very accurate man. Okay, I will say that.
Well,
No,
if you don't mind, let me finish with Councilman Waring, and I'll come back to you.
thank you. And you say, and the reason I said your position with the law school, previous position with the law school was important, because there was a negotiations that took place. Somebody, it wasn't council, somebody said 9 million is good for the law school and less than 3 million, because remember, they owe us 865,000. So 2 plus 0.1, 2.2 additional dollars would be better for the taxpayers. Given the gravity of the drainage problems we have in this city, given the gravity of the affordable housing that could have gone on that same site, by the way, and given the power, frankly, of the ability for council to rezone that property, we can do something about that. We can do something about, and it's amazing, we have a knee-jerk reaction to a 250-room hotel going on that site, and you are most singularly responsible for that happening. That's the irony of it. Too many hotels, but the disclosure on this site was not given to council. So, had I known what I know today, I would not have voted to remove the reverter clause, because all the effort of the 2005 council was to enable expansion of the law school at that site. I think the city paid 1.1 million, and again, it sold it to them for less than 900,000. That was trying to encourage, and I think we should continue to encourage and support if they need 2 additional floors on that site. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor?
That this property, ever since, I don't know when, was in the accommodations overlay zone. And when a property is marketed, a sales agent is going to try to sell it to any user who can use the property for a legal use. And so, along with a special exception, building a hotel on the property was a legal use of the property. In fact, this was one of the properties that I came to council a couple of years ago and requested that it be removed from the accommodations overlay zone. And if we had removed it at that time, then it wouldn't have been marketable for use as a hotel, and maybe the value wouldn't be as much as it is, because I just go by that sense that, as strong as the hospitality market is in Charleston, that if a property can be used for a hotel, that it will be. And so I wish we had removed it from the accommodation zone, and we wouldn't be having this discussion today, but I appreciate that very much.
Councilman Waring?
Let me respond back to that. Had you not come and asked us to remove the reverter clause, it would not be used as a hotel. Isn't that correct, Mr. Mayor?
That is correct.
Well, that gets to a deeper issue, if I may respond.
I yield the balance of my,
All right, if you want to respond, Mr. Mayor, and then Councilmember Griffin.
Maybe legal counsel could help a little bit. There was a reverter clause that was never violated. So it was never the right, according to advice from our legal counsel, that we could take the property back and sell it unless we were to foreclose on it. We didn't want to do that. The law school had had some tough times. Mr. Bell bought the property, bought the school rather, and really has had a miraculous turnaround. He came to us a couple of years ago and felt, because of height or parking or size of the property, that it wasn't adequate for the vision that he had for the future institution here in Charleston. And so we unanimously agreed to this extension of the agreement 2 years ago. We placed a value on the reversion clause at $1 million. It was transparent. It's in the minutes from our real estate committee meeting 2 years ago, which I would be happy to read to y'all verbatim if you like. But we evaluated the thing. The law school had not violated the clause. They could just keep using it for law school purposes, which was the original agreement from 2005 or 7, way before I ever became mayor. And they could continue to keep the property today if they wanted to use it for law school purposes. But they were not in violation. So it was really, folks, a good faith negotiation. They didn't even have to agree to give us 25% of the proceeds, which I recommended to council when we got that 25%, that we use it for our affordable housing needs. And everyone then thought it was a very good idea, and I still think that's a good idea. So I'm sorry this has gotten so complicated. I believe that they bring a huge public benefit to our city. They have been our partner in many ways. Since they started the school, we stuck with them. Yes, we tried to help them 2 years ago to continue that public benefit that was recognized by Mayor Riley and by council, that having a graduate level institution like a law school in Charleston was a great idea. It's still a great idea. And I hate to say, but I don't want to risk running them off. They had offers, Mr. Bell talked about this afternoon. They had offers from Mount Pleasant and North Charleston, give them property and give them incentives. It's a great, I'm proud to have the Charleston School of Law in Charleston. And so I just respectfully think that we ought to take a little more time to have the opportunity to talk with them like they offered to do. I think if you just go ahead now and give them the notice, there's no incentive for them whatsoever to talk to you anymore, Councilmember White. They'll give you the check for $865,000. Ed Bell said he's got the money. He's happy to give it to the city if that's what y'all want. And then he'll sell the property and we'll get the 25% and we're all going to move on. That's a done deal. We agreed to that unanimously 2 years ago.
So I'm going to make a quick comment if I can, and if you don't mind, I need to move along. To answer the question was, in the event that we didn't remove that reverter clause, you're 100% correct. That would have come back to the city, if not used for the School of Law. So that's 100% correct. But I will say, I continue to hear from you, Mr. Mayor, and I take personal offense to this, that it's this body's responsibility and we're the ones that eliminate your ability to make effective change by bringing up this idea that you were going to remove it from the accommodations overlay. It is not our fault that the process that you take these things through are not accurate and you don't communicate with us. That is not our fault, but we're getting blamed. So I take personal offense to that. Councilmember Griffin.
Councilmember White, I agree with you that the process is flawed, but what to me is even more embarrassing, and I just still don't understand why we haven't been answered this question, why you didn't recuse yourself in 2017, and why you didn't let council know that you had had personal dealings, and why we had to find out about it in the media. That to me is dishonorable. It's unethical. You should have shared that information, and the fact that you didn't, I've lost a lot of faith and trust in you as a person. You should have done it.
Councilman Shade?
Chairman.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I have no financial interest whatsoever in this transaction. I did not represent them. Yes, I represented them 10 years ago. For 20 years, I was in the oil business. I sold motor oil to car dealers and trucking companies, and even to the company you work for bought oil from me. I've been in a couple of careers and done a lot of business in Charleston, but since I became mayor, I hung up my real estate license and had absolutely zero financial interest in this transaction or with them, or I would have disclosed it.
But when you disclose that sort of information, doesn't it also say that if your family has personal dealings with it, that you should disclose it? Hasn't your family also had dealings with this?
Not on this transaction, sir.
Not at all on this transaction.
No, sir.
Councilman Shade?
And there's another question, Mr. White, and the response would reply back to me. And I appreciate you bringing this to council's attention. My question with this process is just to make sure that now you got us to the front door. Let's make sure that we don't lose this opportunity. If our intent is to keep the law school on the peninsula, that's my concern. And my question with this is there a contract between the School of Law and a third-party buyer right now?
Yes.
So what is that contract? Do we know the details of that contract?
There's some confidentiality issues. I'll share with you what I think I can share, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Herdina, so if I start saying something I'm not supposed to, you say, stop. But there is a contract currently in place to sell this parcel to an organization that's out of Charlotte that develop hotels for $12.5 million. That's the current contract. The original, there was a contract that was in place at first on this site with a hotel developer that ultimately backed out of the contract because they told me, and I met with them yesterday about this, that they chose not to close or move forward with the contract because they didn't think that was the right place to put a hotel, and they're hotel developers. So this contract went into place, and I will say, legally, we have to recognize that contract. If they move forward and they close, it is what it is.
And do we know any other particular terms of that contract, when they have to close? Are there contingencies associated with that? That we can discuss, or?
I would suggest if we want to get into those details, that we go into executive session, and I can share the agreement with you.
So what I would just maybe point out, we go into executive session a lot. Quite frankly,
recently gone into
too much.
Yeah.
You know, the intent and the interest of the citizens of Charleston, to the degree we can, needs to be heard by the citizens of Charleston. So I have no intentions, and this came up in real estate, I have no intentions of having any discussion whatsoever associated with the contract that is currently in place that would require us to go into executive session. And the reason I would say that is because I'm telling you as a body, we have to recognize that contract, and if they close, it is what it is. What I'm asking this body to do is let's take a shot at trying to change what's going to happen. We already know what happened. We're there. We have the problem. We're already pregnant with this situation. But the reality is that we may have an opportunity to make this a better situation than we currently have, and I believe it's the right thing to do for the citizens of Charleston to do that, and not to just defer or kick the can down the road. Because as I said, when we walked in that door downstairs, there was going to be a hotel on that site. And we came out, and now we're talking about the School of Law may stay there. And there's nothing that would make me happier than how the School of Law stay exactly on that site, which is exactly what we gave that property to them back in 2005.
And Mr. White, if I could just respond to that, and I appreciate what is going on and the efforts that you and the Real Estate Committee have undertaken to do that. And I'm trying to just emphasize this one point. You got us to the point that we want to be at, to bring this to the attention, to get particularly the law school's attention, that we need to keep them on here, and we're going to do what we can to keep them on here. what I'm just concerned about, what I'm generally worried about, is if we pass this motion tonight, is that going to sort of undo the work that y'all have done so far? And that is my genuine concern, because my efforts that y'all have taken so far should be carried out to the extent that we can to lasso them back into this discussion and make sure if they got a contract to close on this property, if that contract is going to give them some money to pay off their note and their obligations to the city, then we missed the opportunity. And that's what I'm trying to avoid happening, missing the opportunity. And I think collectively we've all said this, that we want to make sure that we keep them on the peninsula and use that property to the extent that they have. So that's my concern with where we're going with this and at this point.
All right, so Councilmember Lewis, and then the Councilmember... Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Wagner, and then Councilman Lewis.
I'm going to go. Mine's real quick. As a point of order, we probably need to separate these items.
I was going to make that when we get to that point, yeah.
We do everything but E, and then we can...
Come back.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilman Wagner.
I was going to do just the opposite. I think we about talked this thing to death. We, looked at each other kind of funny and had a bunch of questions. We came with a recommendation to vote yea or nay. Then we somehow got off that, they've been a great friend, ally, neighbor to us, the School of Law. But what it really boiled down to is they got a really great deal on a piece of property, and now it's trying to change hands for a very large profit. So what I would like to see happen is let's vote on the deferral, and then if it's unsuccessful, let's vote the thing and let's be done with it. We just spent an hour on it, and we haven't gone absolutely nowhere. So we're right back to where I think we started, and let's just do it.
And I agree. I'm going to move us on. Councilmember Lewis, then I'm going to call for the question.
Well, I think that we should, the motion real estate committee made. I mean, you eloquently said they want to sell the property. They got all of the property. So if we defer this another 2 weeks, we're going to come right back to the same thing. The real estate committee has put a motion on the floor from the real estate committee, and I think we have to accept it and move on.
All right, so what we're going to do...
I call for the question.
We got an amended motion first.
Yeah, so I think what we want to do is take the other items less E first. Do we want to do that?
Yes.
Is that just make it simpler?
A through D.
All right, so everybody's comfortable with it.
H, 1 and 2.
Okay, A through D plus H.
All right. So that's the motions on the floor, and there was a second, correct?
Councilmember Gregory, and who was the second?
Well, I made the motion for the real estate.
Right, so, okay.
We'll take Gregory as the second.
All right, so on just those items, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Then we have item E. The original motion was, in fact, to approve the report from the Real Estate Committee from Councilman Moody, and I believe then seconded by Councilmember Gregory. Subsequent to that, the mayor made a motion to defer, which takes precedent, second then by Councilwoman Jackson. So that's currently the motion on the floor, and I'm going to recognize Councilman Seekings because I don't know if you've had a chance to speak on this, and then I'm going to call for the question on that.
Well, just briefly, I mean, we've gone around a whole bunch of things on this property and where it stands, where it is, and on the zoning. So I know we're going to bring this back up again tonight, but when we talked, Mr. Mayor, about the zoning on this property 2 years ago, and it was part of a whole package that came along, we, as a body, unanimously deferred it to come back for 2 weeks later, and it never came back. So again, I mean, this whole idea that there was some complicit part on council, I mean, that was just never came back to us. And then it just went off into Never Never Land, and here it is again tonight. So it's kind of a mess at this point, and I think we can unfurl it at some point, but.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and call for the question on the I'm sorry. Is that, all right, we good? This is for the motion to defer the School of Law item. All those in favor of the motion to defer signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. All right, nays have it. Two ayes, that was Council.
Mayor and Councilwoman Jackson.
Right. All right, now that reverts back to the original motion on the floor, and that was to approve the Committee of Real Estate's recommendation to send notice to the School of Law that we would not extend this contract for the third year. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
And the same 2 nays. All right, the ayes have it. I think that was it. All right, we'll move to adjourn. Thank y'all. All right. Tried to catch us up, I'm not sure.